Let's talk about money, because at the end of the day, that's all we can get you.
Yeah.
You know, we can't heal you. We're not doctors. You know, we can't reach into your body and fix it. By the time we get to trial, most of the medical care is usually done anyway. What we can't get you is money. How do we decide how much a case is worth?
So there's a lot that goes into deciding what a case is worth. Generally, the single most important thing for what a case is worth is how hurt you are. It can be kind of a catch-22 sort of situation. If you really aren't that hurt, your case is typically not worth as much. I always tell my clients, even if their case isn't worth as much as some other ones, it's generally better. I don't know anyone who would rather be healthy than have money.
Yeah, when I talk to people, particularly in the workers' compensation system, I say, you know, I've gotten clients millions and millions of dollars. You do not want to be that client, because the clients, particularly in workers' compensation, this isn't as true in trucking accidents, but in workers' compensation, when somebody's been hurt that badly, they would gladly trade feeling better and not being catastrophically injured for the amount of money that they get, because workers' compensation has much more limited damages, meaning that there's just not as much stuff that the insurance covers. But, you know, it is kind of an interesting catch-22, as you said, that the people who are hurt the most get the most money, and you know, hopefully our clients heal and get better.
Yeah.
But, you know, ironically, the people who have bad outcomes with surgery or things like that, you know, they get the silver lining of the fact that their case is worth more. The downside is that they're still very hurt. And so, you know, there is a trade-off there.
Yeah.
So injuries. Why don't you tell folks about the three-legged stool? Because that was fascinating to me when I first started doing personal injury.
So there are three things that go into the value of a case broadly. There's how hurt the client is. There's how nice and likable the client is. And there's how much money is available. So one of the issues that we run into the most is most people driving down the street have $25,000 in coverage for anyone that gets hurt.
That doesn't seem like enough.
It's not, honestly. I have had numerous cases. I can think of one right now where my client spent 3 weeks in Grady, had like $700,000 Grady bill. Man did not have any health insurance or anything. And the other side had $25,000. And the insurance company did everything correctly, so I couldn't make them pay any more. And so that was just all the money that was available, was the $25,000.
So you're telling me that both before and after tort reform, these big insurance companies can get away with paying somebody whose life is destroyed by a car wreck the policy limits, and then there's no way for us to get more?
So there are definitely ways for us to get more. But there are rules in place for the insurance company to follow. And if they dot all the I's and cross all the T's, then there's really not a lot we're going to be able to do with that. I will say insurance companies are big. They don't like to pay their employees very well because they don't want to pay anybody anything. So it's not uncommon that they mess it up. And then we have what's called a bad faith lawsuit. That is one of the few good things that did happen in this go-round is they did not get rid of the bad faith lawsuits against insurance companies when they refused to pay when they should.
Okay, so you're talking about the legislature.
Yep.
Okay, so we still have the opportunity sometimes, if there's enough bad faith by the insurance company, you know, they don't pay out the policy, or they don't pay it out on time, or they make us a bad faith offer. There's sometimes when you can go beyond the policy limits.
Yes, there is sometimes that you can go beyond the policy limits, but that's not, I don't tell my clients to count on that. You can't count on people to mess things up. But if they do mess it up, we go and fight for every penny we can possibly get you after that.
Well, and so do you have any special training that allows you to identify when bad faith happens? Like, because a lot of attorneys don't really understand a bad faith lawsuit.
There's definitely no better teacher than experience, and I have handled a lot of bad faith claims at this point. And one of the things that the legislator has done at behest of the insurance companies is they've made it really complicated as to what is required and what's not required, and whether we messed up asking for the money or they messed up not giving us the money. And because of that, it gets a lot more complicated. And one of the issues that a lot of like pre-lit firms that don't do a lot of litigation and stuff like that have, if you don't actually litigate it, you don't ever find out what those rules really are. Like, you can read the statute, but then knowing how it actually gets interpreted and which way the judges lean and all that sort of stuff, like, you need the experience to do that, honestly.
Well, and when did you say it's true? I think you get a lot of your business from other lawyers who really don't know how to handle this stuff, where they've kind of tried it on their own, and they've gotten to a point where the insurance company's done something sneaky or done something in bad faith and they come to you and say, hey, Bo, we need you to go try this case and turn it into something beyond policy limits.
Yeah, no, it is not uncommon. I will definitely have, on a fairly regular basis, have other attorneys come to me and say, hey, can you take a look at this and make sure that we did everything right and they did, in fact, do something wrong. So that is a relatively common thing I do. I'd say I do it at least once a month or so, more than likely.
Okay. So returning to the three-legged stool, the idea that you can only get a big judgment if you have enough insurance policy to cover it, you've got a client with really serious injuries and probably some good property damage on the vehicle to show a jury that this damage, that the injury is from the wreck. And also somebody who's really likable and somebody who the jury is going to relate to, doesn't have like a lot of criminal stuff in their background, doesn't have a lot of pre-existing conditions, and I know that you can get around that stuff.
Actually, I would say more than the background and the pre-existing conditions and stuff like that, one of the biggest issues is our clients not following our advice.
Oh, that's a good point.
Because it's one of those, I don't generally care how bad your background is. It matters, but as long as I know about it ahead of time, most of the problems with your case I can typically handle. But what I can't handle is if you're doing things like we've advised you on how to do it, what we need you to do, all that sort of stuff, and then you just don't do it.
For example, people who are, they need medical care, but for whatever reason, they just don't go get it.
Yeah, no, it is not uncommon that I'll have, some guy, and he's like, yeah, no, I'm real hurt, but I don't want to go to the doctor, and I don't want to complain about it because I'm just some tough guy.
I call those people brave soldiers.
Yep, it can be a very admirable quality, but if you're not going to the doctor, we can't prove you're hurt.
Well, and also, if I'm on a jury and I see somebody who comes up there and they're asking for a lot of money, I'm going to have a hard time believing that they really went through that much if they weren't hurt enough to go to the doctor.
Yeah, no, it's one of the insurance company's favorite arguments is if you were hurt, you would have gone to the doctor.
So beyond medical bills, what other factors can we take into account when we're trying to figure out how much a case is worth? Do we look at like how much wages somebody lost from the wreck? Do we look at where they live? Do we look at factors like pain and suffering? What else goes into it?
So there's the medical bills, there's the lost wages, there's the amount of time it took you to get better, if you did get better, or whether or not you are going to get better. Because if you get better, then your pain and suffering is capped, as I like to call it, which is honestly the best case scenario is you do in fact get better, sort of thing. But that also means that your pain and suffering isn't going to continue forever, so there's not as much of it.
So if somebody is still hurting, then it would be pretty important for the doctor to document, like, hey, we've done everything we can, but we just can't solve this problem, and this is a person who's going to have pain long term.
Yeah, in fact, there's a medical term for it called maximum medical improvement. Some people call it MMI, and so it's one of those. And sometimes some doctors give up earlier than others. So every now and then you'll be going to the doctor, they'll be like, nope, we've done everything, and maybe you need to look around for some other doctors so we make sure of that. But it is not uncommon, unfortunately, for people to have lingering pain that appears like it's probably just going to be the rest of their life.
Okay, and so maximum medical improvement doesn't mean you're 100% better. What it means is you've gotten as good as you're going to get, and now you've got some sort of permanent impairment.
Yeah, that is what that means. It means that medically you're never going to get any better than you are, and whatever pain or issues you are having is just your new normal.
Well, and if I'm on a jury, I'm going to give somebody a lot more money if they're going to have to live with pain for the rest of their life than if they had kind of a closed period of pain and they got their medical care, but they're better now. I would think that would make a big difference.
Yeah, no, that does make a huge difference in the value of the case because it's harder for me to argue for large numbers if you have gotten better. But it's also, that catch-22. I've never had a client that would rather get the money that we got them or be better.
Fair enough.
So,
what if there's punitive damages? That might actually be a situation where somebody gets more money than the case is worth just to punish the bad actor.
Yeah, so punitive damages are when the other side, the person that hurt you, acted with malice, so they were doing it intentionally, they wanted to hurt you, or they're being so reckless that it rises to the level of willful and wanton, which is just fun legal words. Some of the examples of those are texting and driving. If they're caught texting and driving while they're doing it, then we have an opportunity to argue that they should be punished, not because they hurt you, because they were texting and driving.
So texting alone is a basis for punitive damages, asking for a friend?
Yes, it definitely could be, and I do not recommend you do it. All those billboards up there, like, don't text and drive. It is one of the worst things you can possibly do. But yeah, if we manage to catch the other guy texting and driving, then that does open them up to potentially punitive damages, and we will go seek those to the best of our ability.
What are some other things that you might be able to get punitives on? And is it something that the driver has to do wrong, or is it something the insurance company does wrong?
So for punitive damages, it's almost always the driver, what the driver did wrong. The way we punish insurance companies for not paying is the bad faith lawsuits that we kind of talked about, we've already talked about. So drunk driving is one, the texting and driving is one. I had one case where somebody got mad at my client. My client was trying to merge over. They went into the emergency lane on 75 South, drove in front of my client, get past him, pulled in front of him, and then brake checked him 5 times. And eventually, just my client couldn't do it. It was stop and go traffic, and he ends up rear-ending. My client rear-ended the other driver. And then the other driver admitted to the cop that that's what he was doing.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. How did you find that out?
So this was one, we got fairly lucky on this one. The other driver actually, I'm not 100% certain it was the other driver. There were multiple people in the car with the other driver. So the way the police report read, someone ratted on the driver, or the driver decided to be nice and tell them what actually happened. But that was a case where my client really wasn't that hurt, because it was stop and go traffic. They hadn't been, sort of thing. He went to the hospital. I think he had to do a little bit of physical therapy. But we ended up getting him all of the money available because we could prove that this guy pretty much intentionally caused a car accident.
I've had similar experiences where I find that the police report itself does not say something like that, but then you go back and you watch the police body cam.
Yeah.
And the police officer shows up at the scene of the crime, boop, turns on the body cam, and then people just start explaining how the accident happened, and in the course of that admit all sorts of crazy things.
Yep.
What's the most funny or interesting thing you've ever seen somebody say on a body cam?
So I'm not sure. It was on the body cam, but I can only remember the direct quote that ended up in the police report. The other driver was very, very drunk. And had already fled police, like totaled the car, and then got out of the car and just ran. Essentially, the cops found him. He apparently had an outstanding warrant, so they were going to arrest him for the DUI and all the other stuff he was apparently in trouble for. And then the cop gets him into the back of the car, and again, it's the quote from the police report. And then the suspect proceeded to urinate in the back of my patrol car. And apparently the guy was so drunk that he just didn't know what was going on and pissed himself.
All right. If I'm on a jury, I'm going to be pretty upset about that.
Yeah, no, that was another one where there was a lot of money given out in that one.
Now, one of the things that I've seen is that occasionally drunk drivers will flee the scene of the accident, and when the police come to their home, they will claim that they started drinking once they got home. What do you do in that situation?
So, and that's one of the good things about the civil versus criminal, right? So if you do that, the cop is probably not going to arrest him, because the cop is not going to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he was drinking and driving, because he's going to say that he was at home, and so that gets a lot harder to actually prove on their end. On our end, we only have to prove that it's more likely than not that he was drinking, right? And so I just put that in front of a jury and say, look, you're right, he didn't get arrested for it because, he came out and told this, but do you really think this guy, because I think we had a case recently about this, this guy who hit my client, like knocked him really hard, then drove his car that was leaking coolant, the 3 blocks home, parked, got out, and then went inside, right? So that's what happens.
Well, and that's the one where the police had to chase down the coolant trail.
Yep. Yeah, they followed the trail of the liquid that had been leaking out of the other guy's car. You could tell it had been in a wreck. Like, it had the color of my client's car on the bumper. The bumper's all kinds of messed up.
It was paint transfer.
Yeah, paint transfer is what that's called. So the transfer of our client's paint onto his bumper. So the cop's like, yeah, no, that's definitely the car. And then he knocks on the door. Guy's wife opens the door. It's like, is this guy home? She, I think, initially said no, is my understanding, because, you know, trying to cover up for the husband, apparently. And then the cop, like, sees him walk through the background because, you know, he was drunk. And so the
Pro
cop's like,
tip, by the way, if you're going to flee the scene of a wreck and the police come to the car or come to your house, you probably shouldn't be wandering around in the background while your wife is lying for you.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the cop, like, at that point just walks in and goes and talks to the guy, sort of thing. And he's like, so you've been drinking? He's like, I mean, I started when I got home, was what he said. So the cop didn't arrest him, but he notes all of this down, puts all that stuff out there. And so we've got him for fleeing the scene. And then we're going to argue that he was drunk, because why else do you flee the scene and then immediately go home and start drinking?
Yeah. Well, and the nice thing about that is that, ironically, if somebody is honest and they say, you know, I made a mistake, you know, I caused a wreck, I'm so sorry, this is a first time thing, I've got all the stress in my life. You have a sympathetic person who causes the wreck, right? That is not going to piss off a jury. That's not going to make a jury say, I want to really award a huge judgment against this person. What does make a jury really angry is the person who doesn't cop to it.
Yep.
And then cooks up this story about how they fled the scene and started drinking at home. And then meanwhile, our client has this life-changing injury. That's where I've seen some very, very large verdicts.